We've lots to talk about on the Kerry Tyrone situation. We're going to get into the TV coverage in just a couple of seconds, Maurice, which I'm very excited about. I have to say, it's been my main topic of conversation in my brain for the whole weekend. But let's put it out into the open. Before we do, though, that video, I swear to God, some memories there, I have to say. And maybe history doesn't remember these performances as fondly as if they were winning performances. But some of those ones, I have to say, I was at them. I was at those games, and they live long in the memory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we spoke about the Joe game just in the aftermath of his retirement.
So,
that 2008 game, and I mean, it's kind of scary when you think back on the situation that he was in at that time and what it paved the way for. That was, I often associate the reliance on Joe with the famous Johnny Glynn interview and that kind of explosion, and the idea that got our one-man team. And it's funny, it was established, half a decade before that. Like it's kind of remarkable that that's where it kicked out of. I was actually watching back speaking of last weekend, I was watching back the Kerry Tyrone 2008 game, and it is kind of frightening to watch how good Declan Sullivan was in that game in a losing team as well. I've often said I think when he was fit, was the complete forward in terms of he was elite ball carrier, elite creator, elite scorer, and he demonstrated it all in that game. There was a clip that was going on Twitter. I think I put up on Twitter. I did put up on Twitter of Brian Dooher's point. But if you watch Declan Sullivan's block and carry from that, and then you watch back the game, and he does it over and over again. He's got a point in his left foot, like a little lob early in that game. And you go back and remember that game, Mick. The two McMahons had Tommy Walsh and Kieran Donaghy, on a leash. He was their kind of sole creator. I actually think if Kerry had played through the lines that day with a bit of nous, it would have won, which I guess brings us to what happened on Saturday, because it was a pretty similar situation.
Yeah, history might repeat. That clip, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen it, and a lot of people did, Maurice, you went a little bit mini viral over the course of the last week, but it's just so much in, as you said, like, what is it, a minute and 10 seconds of action in the championship ending with Brian Dooher's famous point. It's well worth checking out. We'll get into the Kerry Tyrone. So one that jumps out to me that is on that list, but I'll never forget it being at the game, was the All-Ireland semi-final in 2015 with that Tip and Galway and Seamus Callanan's 3-9.
Yeah.
It's not the most amazing scoreline. There's better scorelines even on that list, but just how dangerous he was and how every time Galway should have won that game by 20 points, but every time the ball went into the full forward line, Seamus Callanan scored. And I remember Pádraig Mannion was put on him. He wasn't on him originally. He was cornerback those days. And in the second half, I was like basically in line with the full forward line from the Hogan stand. And, I spent the next 2 years not believing in Pádraig Mannion. He won an All-Ireland, and it wasn't until the 2018 All-Ireland final the year after that I kind of realised, wait a second, this guy is an elite, brilliant hurler. And it was because of the fool Seamus Callanan made of him that day. That was entirely not his fault. So I think that just to put that particular performance on a pedestal, that's the impact it had on me. It made me blind to the virtues of one of the best hurlers in the country for 2 full years after.
I think for a lot of people, my generation, Joe Canning did the same thing to the Rock O'Sullivan. I actually think that a lot of people would have very different memories of him because they wouldn't have remembered him early on, and then they suddenly seen this kid just give him an absolute roasting. But as it turns out, he did it to a lot of people after that too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll move on then. We wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously we've talked to Darren about lots of different things about what happened in that game, but on Saturday. And look, I think everybody is agreed that Tyrone were worthy winners, while also agreeing that Kerry were naive and probably should have done a lot more. And I think that's fair enough. I know for some reason both sides seem to get angry at that basic analysis, but you have, I suppose, an issue with the analysis being a little bit too basic on what we see on our national broadcaster and in how we are presented with the game, both in live sense and then in the highlights thing last night on the Sunday game. Are we being shorn of true analysis of why Tyrone won that game and why Kerry lost that game? You've written a piece. People will see it later on today on balls.ie and can read about it, but we're going to have a sneak preview / debate about it right now.
Yeah, like I guess in a sense, Mick, I'm nearly sick of talking about this because it's gone to a stage now where I'm getting DMs from people talking about their grievances with coverage. So for some reason I've become known giving out about TV coverage, which obviously isn't what I want. And I should just stress, I mean, I guess where I think the whatever you want to call it, the problem is that for decades, if you go back to the 90s, right? RTE did a survey. This is the soccer coverage has always steered GA coverage. That has always been the way. And RT did a survey with their soccer panel, and it turns out that I think 30% of respondents said that they understood the game. So that means that you had a huge cohort of people who didn't really understand the game, and they needed it to be dumbed down, simplified. They were totally content with this, pub talk, so the type of stuff you'd be having on bar stools with your friends, terrace talk, whatever you want to call it. That did them fine, and that then led to the coverage of GA. So we saw that, and you had the odd debate thrown in. It was all surface level stuff, and that was all fine. Now, what I think increasingly is happening, and why you see a lot of people increasingly complaining about punditry, I suppose, is because we're a generation now of player, coach, and as a consequence of that, spectator, and they actually do want deeper stuff, immersive analysis. Now, I should stress, like, they shouldn't, the tail doesn't wag the dog. They are still a minority to my mind. There's a core base of people who are totally happy with what we got at the weekend, liked a bit of chat, loved the debate on Saturday. It was all fine and dandy for them. And to my mind, actually, the punditry's failure to address this is the reason that you look across the sphere. GA podcasts are so popular right now. They're, by and large, it's a really, really heavily saturated market, and they're all really successful. And to my mind, the reason they're successful is because it's a niche that they don't get on TV. You don't get that in-depth discussion and analysis. It just doesn't happen, right? And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the way that people who have that sort of interest are there for. So you go back to Saturday. To me, it started off like, to be honest, I thought it was good. And it's a great clip. It was very entertaining. Sean Cavanagh and Pat Spillane debate, whatever, it was a laugh. Nobody was turning off the TV at all, but it became the basis of everything that happened thereafter. So at halftime, Pat Spillane tries to talk about where they're going wrong, and Sean Cavanagh spikes up and he starts to talk about it takes a Kerry man when somebody God forbid somebody put a hand on a Kerry man, which is a bit kind of surface level, a bit petty, to be honest. And that it just keeps going over and over and over again to the end of the game, where you're hearing that the game is Tyrone won because of hunger. They had more intensity. They had copy paste stuff. If I read the transcription of that analysis to you, and I told you to pick a guess which game it was of, you picked any game to championship. That could have been after the All-Ireland hurling final. I could have played a similar thing for you after Dublin Mayo. You wouldn't tell any difference because it's bland. It's very, very standard stuff. And a lot of people are totally happy with that, right? So you either do one or the other, to my mind. What happens now is that they do neither. So they try and use stats that are just routinely wrong, which infuriates people a lot more. You talk to other analysts, like intercounty analysts, about this. They'll bring it up often, I give an example in that piece. The Leinster final, 50 minutes gone, the Leinster final, 14 points to 7, Dublin are up. And a shiny graphic shines up on the screen. Scores from play, Dublin 0 out of 14, Kildare easy. Like, it just, whatever, that's a mistake, whatever you want to call it, but you're not using statistics correctly. They're oftentimes co-commentators are using them, they're wrong, or they're absolutely meaningless. So I think, if you want to appeal to, I have family members who love that kind of stuff, what you saw on Saturday and what you saw on Sunday, and maybe the likes of myself just need to get it elsewhere now, because we're not getting it on TV, and the fact that they're trying to include it is only actually making it worse. It's nearly vexing me more. I'd be interested to know, like, what you thought of even Saturday, for example, because to my mind, I did think that while it was one good moment, it just became too much.
Okay, can I give you a wider shot first, and then I'll get into Saturday, because I did think it was a bit different. So I have to say that I'm somewhere in between. Like, one of my issues lately in soccer into GA, as you say, they tend one to lead into the other, is that what we miss in the old days of the Giles, Dunphy, Brady is the ability to throw out the running order and to focus on one thing and have a big, long discussion about it. And I feel that it's become sterile lately, in that, right, we've had this discussion, now we have to move on to the analysis, we have to move on to what we've already prepared, and while I feel that at a certain point, maybe around sort of 2010, 2011, became, this is our successful formula, let's go with it. So therefore it became contrived and useless. It loses all of its magic, because it became, we've stumbled on this winning formula, let's go always to the winning formula. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, of course, yeah.
And GA, I think, always a couple of years behind. For example, I used to love Joe Brolly on the panel, but by the time he was let off, and me and you had millions of discussions about it, I didn't want him there, because I thought it was all pantomime. And if it's not real, that has no place on TV. Now, so while you might want the more analysis, for example, I thought they had a nice blend on the Sunday game. You're saying do one or the other. This is last night's show now with Tomas O'Shea. Whereas I thought I did learn a bit about the game. I learned from Tomas on both occasions, actually, not from the other two, as to Kerry not tracking the runners. That's something you just don't see in real time, really, unless you're really looking out for it when you're just following the ebb and flow of the game. The Paul Gainey, Conor Myler clip, I thought was really, really brilliant analysis and a really good insight. And so also earlier on with Kerry's kind of like blind play going forward, I think that was a little bit more obvious to see, but it was still good to be highlighted, and that's good analysis. But they were also having the more wider discussions and so on. Now, would I like that to be in a situation where the running order was thrown out and we stopped and talked about why Kerry are in this position, or who is the person to replace Peter Keane if he's not the man to do it? Of course, that would be better than, I think, a sort of a, right, well, we have to get to the next thing. We have to make sure we cover everything we discussed in the meeting. That's my personal opinion, and I felt they actually did a good blend, and we can get on to that. Saturday now is a weird one because I'm going against my own thing. It was, I thought, from the minute it started, I thought it was very genuine, but I thought that it was borderline unprofessional. I thought that Sean Cavanagh went on and within 2 seconds was giving out about a Tyrone conspiracy theory, basically, about the whole country being against them and being unfair on them and so on. Pat Spillane, as he is prone to do, played into it perfectly, but you could tell Pat's playing the game. Yeah, Sean was angry, and he remained angry for the entire show, and I thought that made it difficult. It was, as you said, it's entertaining, but nobody's getting anything out of it. And I thought that the analysis of the entire show suffered because Sean Cavanagh was angry and he couldn't properly analyze the game. I had this discussion on Twitter, sorry to go on, about if you can't put aside your bias for your analysis, then you shouldn't be on the show. I don't necessarily think you have to always have neutral analysts. I think there's a place for, I'm for Tyrone. Anthony Daly would be on and he would talk about it being, about his wanting Clare to do it all the time. Yeah. But when he does the analysis piece, you trust that he's taking both sides equally as seriously. He's able to separate his job from his passion. And that was where I thought there was a problem on Saturday. I didn't think there was a separation between the passion and the job they were there to do.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, really, to be honest. The Sean Cavanagh stuff, I just, I don't know where you start with that, to be honest. I thought, I was, at the time, I was roaring laughing about it. But
the second he went on air.
It was just totally bizarre. He has his stuff with Kerry is very weird. Going back, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about the rivalries, past players and rivalries. I remember a couple of years ago he was writing about players patronising them after a league game, and the whole Tyrone squad and Mickey Hart had come out after that and said they were paying their respects to Mickey Hart. It was widely established, but for some reason he interpreted it as a slight, and he just seems to have this, I don't know, bee in his bonnet that was very, very evident on Saturday. And I guess my point really, Mick, is that whatever, that I'm not the target audience for that. I'm very conscious that I'm not the target audience for that. And maybe Ortiz's attitude is, listen, let him go off. This is entertaining. A lot of people will be talking about this afterwards, and then we'll get into the real nitty-gritty stuff elsewhere. If you want proper analysis, go onto their website today. Aidan O'Rourke's written a brilliant piece breaking down the game. I would much rather listen to what Darren is going to say, or what Darren has said about the Kerry game versus what you got after the game in the immediate aftermath. The stuff about, I find it personally insulting, really, to be honest, when you hear one team wanted it more than the other. It's baffling. It's patronising to Tyrone because you're saying, I think it undermines their skill, their technically. It's also very, very patronising to the Kerry players, to say that stuff like hunger and they wanted it more. Are you telling me, Paddy Clifford, who talked to locals in Fossa about the work Paddy Clifford has put in the last 18 months, this is a guy who didn't make a minor in 21 team, who broke himself, the physical condition, the kg he's put on in the last 6 months. You're telling me he didn't want it as much as Conor Myler? I think that it's a really easy trap to fall into when you're not capable of talking about wider turnovers, tackle technique, that kind of stuff. And maybe without a doubt,
it's simplistic. But I just want to interrupt for a second because I agree. Look, I don't think anybody wants it more than the other, but that is the language of the terrace, as you know.
Yeah, exactly.
As every game you've ever been, and that's not good enough to put that and use it on TV when you know better. Okay, but what I would ask you is, there's definitely an intangible that is in that family but that isn't hunger or desire or work, like that is, but there's an intangible that can't be analyzed by tactical breakdowns. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And we just need to, my argument would be, instead of it being kind of like an insulting thing to say that Kerry didn't want it as much, we need to find what that language is. I don't know what the word is, but we all know, and me and you've had this discussion many times, in GAA, there is that moment where 10 minutes into a game, you can sense that. And again, the language is wrong. My word would always be they're more up for it. But and you know what? I think in a weird way, it's actually the dreaded I word. I think it is an intensity thing and I know it sounds lazy, but I really do think it matters. And it doesn't come from not wanting it as much. It comes from just a weird ability to hit the ground running and to go out and to deliver at 100%, as opposed to the other team not being able to, and you're catching up for the entire game and you can't get to the run of the game.
And maybe Mick, why, it's really interesting to say that, because we've used that word a lot of times, and maybe the reason that these conversations are a lot more suitable for podcasts is because you have the scope to delve into why is that the case. Say, for example, you look at the weekend and what went on in Kerry, and we talk about intensity. So you would go back, and I would look at, for example, I think Kerry, they were 35. Tyrone turned them over 35 times. 30 of them were in the attacking third, which is a phenomenal statistic, right? You look at the two goals they conceded were so demonstrative of their problems for me. The first goal, you go back and watch that goal. It's a turnover. David Clifford takes, I don't know if you remember, takes a solo too many. It's turned over. Tyrone worked the goal. So it's 5 passes. So Tyrone can turn over the ball inside their own 45. It's 5 passes to their goal. Now, if I was to ask you, how many Kerry players, I'm not even talking about a statistic tackle, how many Kerry players would you guess put their hand on a ball carrier, got their hand to a player? It was one. The one player got his hand to, which is just, it's so demonstrative of a bigger problem. The second goal, that's 12 passes. That's the one, it's the turnover deep in their own half, trying to work the ball. How many players within those 12 passes, again, working the field the ball, 12 passes, one player, again, hand on the ball. Moynihan got his hand to McGeary. He actually, it looked like maybe McGeary might have overcarried there. Moynihan was definitely convinced of it. That was the only time that a Kerry player got their hand on a player. So that's, I think it would be very fair to say that is evidence of a lack of intensity. So then you take it a step further and say, right, where does that come from? Kerry's tackling, to my mind, has gotten significantly worse since 2019 when they played Dublin. What has changed since then? Donny Buckley, who we know is a renowned coach for his tackling. We've had people on the podcast previously. A couple of years ago, we spoke to Lee Keegan, who raved about the box sessions that they used to do in Mayo with Donny Buckley. Is that a factor? Maybe it is. He left last year in fairly acrimonious circumstances. There definitely is a problem with Kerry's tackling, as in their technical tackling ability has lessened significantly. They don't put enough pressure on the ball up the field. So you get a situation where players are able to overrun them, and that's when suddenly, the blame might come to a fullback. But the problem is further up the field when you're not pressurizing the ball. And that all comes down to, you could summarize that all up. Like the 10th pole that we're going to throw all this over is intensity, right? But the reason that this conversation is fair than say that conversation is because you can point to demonstrative evidence of where those issues lie. Whereas, after a game, it is just kind of this, it is always come down to intensity. It is always come down to hunger. It is always, and let's say, right, the point of my piece isn't to plow on with that, to be honest. My mother watches the Sunday game. She doesn't care about productivity and efficiency and turnover rates. She, it doesn't matter to her.
Yeah.
Laugh about Pat Spillane and that kind of stuff, and plow on with that. Where I do think that we're being slightly let down is that we don't have a midweek analysis show to actually delve into that stuff. I think the demand for that has never been greater because of this new generation who've been reared on, you mentioned soccer, like the Monday Night Football is a classic example. We've been reared and embraced that, and we don't have that in GA, which I just think is a massive shame. Now, I would just, as I said before, I would say that stuff is, the reason that this stuff is elsewhere is because the demand is there for it. I'm firmly of the belief that demand is there for it. I don't believe you can, I think it's nearly insulting to the average GA fan to say that they're not interested in that kind of stuff, because there's a big enough cohort out there who are. We actually, if you want to get into behind the baseball here, like our inside baseball, we would definitely be able to prove, there is a firm interest in analytics, statistical based analysis. But, as I say, we're not getting it on TV, and maybe that's fine. Like I say, I'm in no doubt that I was not the target audience of what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, we should also mention that Sky do it it's not perfect, and there's always going to be limits to a TV show, but I think they do make an effort, and I think that Peter Canavan and James O'Connor in particular, in the football and hurling respectively, do make a bit of an effort. And within a live show as well, they don't have the benefit of 24 hours. I would say that the Sunday game, again, for me, I thought they struck a balance last night. I do think it needs to be for your mother to watch back the game, but also why not throw in a little bit of of actual explanation for us as well. And again, like, I think to suggest they didn't do a good job last night, in my opinion, like, again, both of the pieces of analysis by Tomás O'Shea, like, I saw the Tyrone goal live and I never saw it again, the first goal, and thought, oh my God, this is one of the best goals I've ever seen in Croke Park. The movement, and all of that is true. But when you look at it from the Kerry defensive point of view, it lessens the quality of the goal slightly, and I think it's important to see that in both sides, So I don't know. I find that there was a balance there last night that was decent, and I think it was because they had one senior men's game anyway to analyze that they gave the bulk of the show to, and it was the same with the All-Ireland, the semi-final a couple of weeks ago. It's always different with the finals because they start doing team of the year discussions and so on and so forth. But with the Mayo with the two hurling semi-finals and the Mayo Dublin game, I thought they did a similar job, and I just felt it was it was a serious conversation. It wasn't full of nonsense and arguing and fighting. And then maybe it could have went one more generic way and one more tactical way. And I suppose my argument is that that's fine, and your argument is that you're falling between two stools and you're serving nobody by doing the in-between job.
To a certain, more or less. I kind of agree with you more or less on the Sunday game last night, because the template that you could adopt for a midweek analysis show is that you pick one or two games, go really heavy on it. Like, I agree. I think Tomás O'Shea is by and large the best pundit she has. But like, I think there's scope for, I guess is what I'm saying, Mick. It's funny, like, we got the stuff post game, and I think fair enough. That's not for us. And then we go to the Sunday game, and the first question is about is it too simplistic? And you're back to this idea again where I just think it's a constraint that they're grappling with, that could have been a talking points show, and then you could have a midweek analysis show. I just firmly believe that if we had, as a GAA fan, look around you and you look at the way the game's being covered, and Punditry in particular, and I just think we're being shortchanged to a large extent not to have that there. How many times have I been texting you, or we've talked on this before, about the camera missing puckouts or kickouts, right? Like, that's an issue that's going back years and years. I interviewed Ollie Baker, the famous hit against Tipperary. The one, the cameras missed it. He caught the ball in midfield, turned, put it over the bar. He never see it. He actually knew the cameras missed it because he glanced up at the screen. They were still showing a replay of the puck out. So this is, what is this, 97? Like, this is over 20 years ago, and that mistake is still being made. You fast forward 20 years. So and the reason that from a match director perspective, the technology, like, we've actually seen templates there to capture, the box and box, or whatever you want to call it, that TG Carr use. The reason that it's not a capability thing, the capability is there. The reason they don't do it is because they don't think there's enough interest in it. That a lot of people don't really care about puckouts or kickouts. They're more interested in seeing the scores, seeing the highlights, taking in the game. That stuff doesn't matter to them. Whereas there's a new cohort, a very sizable cohort, who want to see the greatest weapon in Gaelic football right now is what Niall Morgan is doing off a tee, or Stephen Hooks did before him. They want to see that. They want to see full court presses. There's a huge, like, a massive size of people who feel like they're being shortchanged by TV, but not getting to see that. And
you're
I think
100% right on that. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're going to have a discussion during the week, and people will see it on Tuesday with our Rolling All-Stars team, and there's going to be a good few thrown in. But, like, for me, I spent a lot of yesterday thinking, is Niall Morgan going to replace Rory Beggan on that team? And one of the things was he was losing a considerable amount of kickouts while clearly having this, this kind of, like, display for the ages in open play. And, but at the same time, I wanted to see the context of some of those kickouts. If he's trying that little bit more to get that extra edge, it's more forgivable than if he's just kicking the ball out over the line and not really, being inaccurate. And you don't get that in the live TV coverage. You just don't, and that's, it's unfortunate. And look, not everybody there needs to pick a role in All-Stars team, but people do want to see how players are performing, and especially the most important players on the field, which are the goalkeepers now.
I'm so glad you said that. That's the best example. If people want to know the different perception from a player versus the average punter, go back and read Niall Morgan's interview with Balls around, was it this time last year? It was around this time last year, I think. Oh no, sorry, it would have been later in the year. It was after Tyrone were knocked out of the 2020 championship. Go back and read it. Niall Morgan talks about RTE analysing his kickouts. This, he said, we talk about statistics, right? He said there's this nonsense, absolutely nonsense obsession with retention rates. How many kickouts do you obtain? The goal of Niall Morgan's goal with every single kickout is a score. He doesn't want, if he loses the ball, he doesn't care if the stat looks bad and RT are criticizing him. He wants them to work a score. So when they go, that's why they go long, because your chances. Kerry went short with 17 or kickouts yesterday. I think they worked 4 points off it. Like it was below 20% convert kickouts. So the Shane Ryan comes away, he looks great. Listen, he's what is he, like 100% retention from his kickouts? But how many scores did he work off his kickouts? The retention doesn't matter. Niall Morgan in that interview, he said, go back and watch RTE, and they're pausing cameras and they're saying, oh, look at the option over here. Why did Niall Morgan kick it over here? He's his leg cocked and he's wound up. Like the decision where he's kicking is made long before then. Now that's from a player's perspective. So he doesn't care. Like, the point, but that's what I'm saying to you, right? There's people who actually would be, I think, interested in Niall Morgan's perspective on that. I want to actually understand, why did the retention rates not work? I did a coaching conference a couple of years ago. Aidan O'Rourke, who I just mentioned earlier, the former Armagh footballer, and he was doing a pitch session, right? And he was talking about, these are the kickouts we'll use here. And, you could be obsessed with your retention and you can tap the cornerback all day and get 100% and look at this great stat and make you feel good. But if you're not working scores off it, they're not worth a damn. And that's it. So every single goal, the reason, you get these break rating pockets, deep left, deep right, is because you get players running over the ball. That creates an overlap. That dramatically increases your chance of a score. Now, if it doesn't come off, you lose the kick out and, what have you. You have to try but even if you lose it up there, you can try and force a turnover. So that's the level of understanding that, like, coaches know this stuff already, right? Most inter-county players will be very, very, and I think that's a window, a interesting window that we as spectators would love to be able to see into, and the majority of the time we don't.
Yeah, and look, just the last thing on this, and I think you'll agree on this, is that it's easy to throw stones, and there's a lot of limitations and on what they're able to do, and also I would say that they are catering to a very, very wide audience. My point, and I think your point as well, I hope anyway, is like, you can put these things into the general conversation without them coming across as nerditry, for want of a better word. Isn't the word. You can just make this part of the conversation. Like, there's no reason why the COCOM can't be talking about Niall Morgan's kickouts all day. You make a story of it. It becomes part of the game. Then it becomes part of, like, the in-game analysis of the winning and losing of the game. There's nobody doesn't want that. I don't think the casual viewer just wants us talking about intensity and hunger all day, and about how they should have got that point. Or he should have, like, the only analysis is whether somebody kicked a bad wide or kicked a good score. I don't think anybody wants that. And I think you can fit all these things in and make them a part of the narrative, and people just want the narrative at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. Like, I think there definitely is scope to get a balance. I guess my counterpoint is that I don't know if there's as much interest in striking that balance as opposed to trying to tick a couple of different boxes and you end up falling down between two stools. Yeah. But look, I mean, this stuff is, when you talk about this stuff, it always comes across as being oversimplified, and like, it is worth stressing how I personally think how good, like, across the board, the punditry has been this year. Like we mentioned Tomas there, I think James O'Connor on the screen for some of the stuff he did for Sky Sports this year was just absolutely fascinating. So
yeah, I think in real time, like it's amazing.
Which is so hard to do. It's such an unbelievable skill to turn stuff around. Like, not just from an individual perspective, but from a team perspective. You're talking about cutting clips, getting stats together. It's such a hard thing to do, and this stuff always comes across as being oversimplified when you talk about it on podcasts like this. But at the end of the day, I do think there's scope to do more, and maybe you're right. Maybe this is the early days of that developing, and we will see that over the coming years. If you were to be the optimist in me, hopes that is the case.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on, or before we go, it's since the back door came in, which is also the start of this century. Galway and Meath in 2001, Tyrone and Armagh in 2003. Cork and Down in 2010, and Donegal and Mayo in 2012 are the only All-Ireland finals without Dublin or Kerry in it. This is good for the game that we're going to have Tyrone and Mayo, and it's a new, like, they've played each other over the years, but there's no, like, real intense famous rivalry there between these two teams. I remember the more in underage finals, to be honest. I one in particular that comes to mind. Like, this is, I think, 2013, the minor final. not sure about that. I should have that more. But I think this is great for the game that we're going to have a new pairing in an All-Ireland final.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah, I think there's a real novelty factor around this final. I think they're both the fact that that neither of these teams have won an Ireland, in Tyrone's case, in over a decade. In Mayo's case, we don't even need to go there. But also just the fact that I think there are two teams that play. Not to go all nerdy here, like a modern brand of football. You get really fluid play, really athletic footballers. I think that matchups was very exciting. To look at it from that perspective, and also in terms of just the pure getting away from Dublin and Kerry, which was or Dublin in particular, this kind of perceived dominance. I think it will only be good for the game. It's a final I'm really looking forward to. I would. This is a conversation for another day. My own personal feelings about the last 2 years of championship football. I honestly think the quality of football for the first time in my lifetime has declined collectively here, right? Like individually, players definitely benefited from the pandemic in terms of their conditioning and individual technical skills, but collectively, I think the game understanding, game management, cohesion, defensive organization, attacking structures have all declined in the last few years. That's just my own personal opinion. I even thought that on Saturday, as entertaining as it was, I thought it was a low quality game. This conversation for another day. But I do think as long as the teams will, that to me, like, people might disagree with this. I don't really care as long as it's entertaining. And Saturday was wonderfully entertaining. And I think this particular matchup guarantees an entertaining final, which is for me is the main thing.
Yeah. Is that just the game has gone so cohesive and team heavy now that if you're not playing as many games as you used to be, which these teams aren't, it's not going to be as cohesive or as good. That's probably it, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. 100% that is the case, and it also is the case that these teams the contact time has declined. They don't, you don't get sufficient time to road test. Say if Kerry's inability to develop a plan B, I would say if the quick ball, what I mean by that is the ball to the inside line isn't on, what do you do next? I would say if Kerry had another couple of league games, they probably would have road tested that and tried a running game and whatever, but they didn't have the opportunity to do that, and as a result, their attacking structure is the run down blind alleys and the usual stuff that went wrong on Saturday. But like I said, that issue that I don't think is
5 weeks. We should have got on to Shane McGrath about some A versus B games. Liam Sheedy talking about piping in the noise into Semple Stadium of the Kerry Dublin 2019 All Ireland final, so that the players wouldn't be. There's lots of things they could have been. Now maybe they were, obviously, but Kerry definitely seemed like they weren't fully at the races. We've talked to Darren about that already, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to the final. We'll hopefully, as you said, maybe in the 2 weeks, or maybe Mayo have been working on their cohesiveness in A versus B games for the last couple of weeks. But we'll talk about it lots more before we get to it. Thanks a million for joining us, Maurice. And lots of food for thought. People can read your piece on balls.ie, which goes into more detail about the TV coverage.
Cheers, Mick.